The taste of iron and rot slammed into my throat the second I regained consciousness, sharp and suffocating, yanking me out of the last fragment of my normal life. 1 second I was sitting in my small apartment in Portland, scrolling through news feeds on my laptop after a long shift. And the next, cold, gritty wind was tearing across my face, carrying the stench of death and wild beast dung. I lurched forward, hands slamming into cracked, weathered stone to steady myself. And my head throbbed like someone had split my skull open with a blunt axe. Disorientation crashed over me in brutal waves, every nerve in my body screaming that none of this was real, that this had to be some hyper-realistic nightmare. But the pain was too vivid, the cold too biting. The scene stretching out before me too hellish to dismiss as a dream. I straightened up slowly, my joints stiff and aching, and swept my gaze across the world I'd been violently dropped into. Beneath my feet lay the crumbled remains of a once grand castle courtyard, its flagstones cracked, overgrown with dead thorns and brown, withered grass. Massive sections of the outer curtain wall had collapsed entirely, leaving jagged, gaping breaches that opened straight into the endless, desolate wilderness beyond. Loose stone rubble littered every corner. Rusted fragments of broken iron spears and rotted wooden planks half buried in the dirt. Silent proof that this place had been abandoned and dying for years. This was my territory, my new kingdom, or more accurately, my death trap. A faint, cold, mechanical voice echoed directly inside my skull the moment I finished processing my surroundings, sharp and emotionless, leaving no room for doubt or denial. Global death game integration complete. All civilian hosts from modern Earth have been successfully transplanted to the alternate American wasteland continent. Host identity: Elias Voss. Designated title: Border Ruin Lord. Territory status: collapsed castle outpost. 0 garrison troops. 0 food reserves. 0 defensive facilities. Extremely high invasion risk. Survival warning. Wild beasts and wandering bandit factions are actively scanning unprotected ruined territories. Mortality rate of 0 resource lords within 72 hours. 98. 7. My breath caught in my throat, and a cold wave of dread flooded my chest, freezing every drop of blood in my veins. I'd seen the viral online rumors before, strange, cryptic posts about a so-called death game that was supposedly sweeping the globe, abducting ordinary people and dropping them into a lethal fantasy world. Like every other rational person, I'd written it off as a viral marketing stunt, a creepypasta hoax cooked up for clout. But now, standing in this lifeless ruin, listening to the system's cold statistics ring in my head, I knew every word was terrifyingly real. Billions of people across Earth had been ripped from their homes, their families, their ordinary lives, all thrown into this brutal wasteland to fight, starve, and die for the amusement of some unknown force. And I was one of the unlucky ones chosen to be a ruin lord, the lowest, most vulnerable rank in this twisted game. I turned slowly, scanning every inch of my broken territory. And the despair only deepened. The castle's inner keep was half collapsed, its wooden doors splintered and hanging off rusted hinges, empty of any furniture, any supplies, any sign of life whatsoever. The well in the courtyard was choked with dead leaves and stone debris. Its water long dried up. There was no grain, no meat, no clean water, no tools, no weapons, not a single thing that could sustain human life. I had no soldiers, no allies, no defenses. Nothing but broken stone and endless desolation. I was a lord with no people, no land worth owning, no power, and no hope. A distant, blood-curdling snarl cut through the howl of the wind a second later, sharp and primal, snapping my full attention to the tree line half a mile beyond my broken walls. The dense, gnarled forest lining the wasteland's edge was dark and foreboding, its shadows twisting and shifting like living things. I squinted, my heart hammering against my ribs, and caught sight of movement, dozens of low, muscular shapes slinking through the underbrush, their fur matted and dark, their eyes glowing with faint, predatory red light in the gray daylight. Shadow hounds. The system's auxiliary database popped up unbidden in my mind, feeding me critical information. Native wasteland predators, pack hunters with razor-sharp fangs and blinding speed. They hunted in groups, targeted weak, unprotected territories, and could tear an unarmed human apart in seconds flat. And there were at least 20 of them lurking in the trees, circling the edge of my territory like patient executioners. Before I could process the full terror of that sight, a terrified scream tore through the wasteland air, loud and desperate, originating from the neighboring ruined territory just east of mine. It was a raw, human sound, filled with pure, unadulterated panic. And it sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline shooting through my system. I spun toward the sound, peering over a pile of crumbled stone, and witnessed a scene so brutal it made my stomach lurch. A man around my age, mid-20s, wearing a flannel shirt identical to the kind I used to wear back on Earth, was sprinting blindly across the open wasteland. His jeans were torn and bloodied, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, his lungs burning as he ran for his life. I recognized him instantly, Jasper Reed. One of the many ordinary people abducted alongside us, a stranger I'd seen fleetingly in the faint, Shared consciousness flashed the system had forced on all integrated hosts. Jasper's own small ruin outpost was just as broken and resourceless as mine. And he'd clearly been caught off guard by the roaming Shadowhound pack. 3 of the massive beasts were closing in on him fast, their paws eating up the ground, their snarls growing louder by the second. He had no weapon, no shelter, nowhere to run. I watched, frozen in place. As one Shadowhound lunged forward with explosive speed, its jaws clamping down hard on the back of Jasper's fleeing leg, a brutal, crunching scream erupted from his throat. He crashed face first into the dirt, hands scrabbling uselessly at the ground as he tried to crawl away. Tears and dirt coating his face. The other 2 hounds swarmed in instantly, sinking their fangs into his arms and torso, tearing through fabric and flesh like paper. I could hear every wet, tearing sound, every ragged, dying gasp. I could see the blood soaking into the dry, cracked wasteland earth, bright red and sickening against the dull brown stone. 30 seconds later, the screaming stopped. Jasper went still. The Shadowhounds began feasting without hesitation, ruthless and unrelenting, proving exactly how fragile human lives were in this godforsaken world. I clamped a hand over my mouth to muffle my ragged breathing, my entire body trembling violently. Cold sweat trickled down my spine, soaking the back of my thin t-shirt. That could have been me. That would be me. Sooner rather than later. I had no walls to hide behind, no weapons to fight with, no food to sustain me, no way to outrun these brutal predators. The system's 98.7 mortality rate wasn't just a cold statistic, it was a guaranteed death sentence for people like us. Ordinary modern humans dropped into a medieval-style death arena with zero preparation. No soldiers, no supplies, no defenses. Just me, alone in a broken castle. Surrounded by beasts that hunted humans for sport. Despair crashed over me in crushing waves, heavy and inescapable. I'd survived 26 years of ordinary life, worked hard, kept my head down, played by all the rules only to die a horrific, violent death in some alien wasteland. Torn apart by wild dogs for no reason at all. I sank down onto the cold stone rubble, my legs giving out completely, and stared numbly at the tree line where the Shadowhounds still lingered, their red eyes occasionally flickering toward my position. They hadn't rushed me yet. But it was only a matter of time. They were finishing their meal, resting up before moving on to the next easy target, me unprotected, helpless self. This is it, I thought dully, my mind going blank with resignation. This is how I die. Just as I fully surrendered to the cold grip of hopelessness, a new series of system notifications flashed bright in my mind, different from the generic global alerts that all other lords received. These words were sharper, warmer, uniquely tailored, carrying a faint golden glow that separated them from the standard death game interface. Detected host extreme survival crisis. Detected host unique soul resonance qualifying condition met. Exclusive hidden lord system activating. Activation progress. 10. 45. 80. 100. Congratulations. You have awakened the unique private lord system, independent of the public death game system. Exclusive hidden privileges unlocked. Special territorial shelter. Unique companion binding. Non-public survival benefits. Initial hidden reward awaiting host activation. My eyes flew wide open, and the numb despair freezing my veins shattered in an instant, replaced by a surge of stunned, disbelieving hope. A hidden system, exclusive to me, separate from the brutal public death game that was killing every other ordinary lord, while every other abducted human was trapped in a fair, ruthless death battle with no loopholes, no mercy, no special favors. I had just unlocked a secret, hidden lifeline. The Shadowhounds in the distance lifted their heads, finished with their gruesome feast, and turned their glowing red eyes directly toward my broken castle. Low, rumbling growls echoed across the wasteland, carrying on the wind. They were coming for me now, but for the first time since I woke up in this hellish world, I wasn't drowning in fear. I stared at the glowing golden system text lingering in my mind, my heart racing with a mix of adrenaline and desperate anticipation. Whatever this hidden system was, whatever exclusive privileges it held, it was my only chance to survive the looming death that was seconds away from crashing down on me. The low, guttural growls of the Shadowhounds grew louder by the second, cutting through the barren wind of the wasteland. Dozens of crimson eyes locked onto my hunched figure atop the broken stone courtyard, and the pack began to advance in slow, deliberate strides. They were no longer sated from devouring Jasper's body, their bloodlust had flared anew. Fixated on the only living human left within miles, every muscle in my body coiled tight, survival instinct screaming at me to run, to hide, to do anything to escape the oncoming slaughter. Yet I forced myself to stay rooted in place. Running was useless. The hounds were faster, relentless, and the open wasteland offered zero cover. My only shot at life rested entirely on the mysterious hidden system flickering in the back of my mind, the exclusive privilege no other lord in this death game possessed. I focused all my attention on the glowing golden system prompt, my thoughts sharp and urgent. Activate the initial reward. Right now. The moment the command formed in my head, the golden text in my consciousness burst brighter. washing away the dim gray haze of the public death game interface that loomed over every other trapped human. A brand new line of notification materialized instantly, crisp and authoritative, carrying a weight that felt nothing like the cold, mechanical warnings of the global system. Initial hidden reward activated. Exclusive ghost MAID companion bound. Unique companion, Lilith Hale. State: spiritual ethereal form. Hostilely visible. Fully loyal. Companion exclusive talent. Wasteland gourmet creation. Territorial stealth maintenance. Passive host protection. Special opening benefit. First gourmet meal unlock supreme cheese pepperoni pizza. I blinked hard, half convinced the desperation of my situation was making me hallucinate. Ghost MAID. Pizza. In this godforsaken hellscape where every living human was starving, where the only sustenance was raw, tainted wasteland game and muddy, brackish water, the entire world around me was broken, barren, and devoid of any modern comfort, let alone a piping hot slice of pizza. It was absurd, almost ridiculous, a stark contrast to the bloody, brutal reality unfolding around me. Before I could process the sheer absurdity of the system's reward, a soft, faint warmth bloomed out of thin air directly beside me. The frigid wasteland wind that had been biting at my skin abruptly softened, as if an invisible barrier had risen up to shield me from the harsh elements. A faint, gentle glow of silvery white light condensed above the cracked flagstones of the courtyard, swirling and weaving together to form a delicate, human-shaped silhouette. The light was faint, ethereal, impossible to spot unless you were looking directly at it. No hound, no distant enemy. No other trapped lord could perceive this phenomenon. This was my secret, my exclusive gift in a world of unrelenting cruelty. Slowly, the light solidified, and the figure of a young woman took shape before my eyes. She wore a classic vintage MAID uniform. Crisp black fabric trimmed with clean white lace, the hem of her dress floating slightly above the stone ground as if she had no physical weight at all. Her long dark hair fell softly over her shoulders, and her features were gentle, calm, and impossibly serene. Free of the terror and despair that plagued every other soul in this death game, her eyes were a soft silver gray, warm and tranquil, holding no trace of the wasteland's brutality. She was translucent, her form shimmering faintly at the edges, proof of her ghostly, ethereal nature completely intangible to the physical world, yet utterly real to my eyes. This was Lilith Hale, my ghost MAID. She turned her gaze toward me, and a soft, quiet voice echoed directly in my mind, warm and soothing. Unlike the cold robotic tone of any system alert, Master Elias, I have awakened to serve your territory and sustain your vitality. Your first meal will be ready momentarily. There was no fanfare, no dramatic display of power, just quiet, unwavering efficiency. Lilith lifted one slender, translucent hand, and a wisp of silver light drifted from her fingertips, settling gently on a flat piece of intact stone beside me. The stone, weathered and cold just a second prior, began to glow faintly with a warm golden radiance. I leaned forward slightly, my tension fading into stunned curiosity, watching as the impossible unfolded right in front of my eyes. Out of thin air, ingredients began to materialize one by one. Soft, proofed pizza dough flattened perfectly across the stone's surface. Fresh, vibrant tomato sauce spread evenly over the crust, followed by thick layers of creamy melted mozzarella cheese. Savory pepperoni slices dotted the top, glistening slightly with natural oil, and a faint, heavenly aroma began to fill the air. Rich, warm, savory, the familiar comforting scent of a fresh baked pizza from my old life on Earth. My stomach, which had been tight and knotted with fear and hunger since I'd woken up in this wasteland, lurched violently. I'd not realized how starved I was until that warm, inviting scent washed over me. In the back of my mind, the global death game system continued spamming cold, harsh survival reminders for all nearby lords. Warning: low physical stamina detected for all border ruin lords. Wild food scarcity at 100. No processed food available in the current wasteland zone. Prolonged hunger will cause attribute decay, reduce movement speed, weaken physical defense, and eventual organ failure. All around this desolate stretch of land, every single abducted human was suffering through crippling starvation, forced to scavenge for rotten berries or risk their lives hunting feral beasts for tough, gamey, unsafe meat. No one had access to cooked food, let alone fresh, delicious, modern takeout-style pizza. Processed food didn't exist in this lethal fantasy world. Hot meals were a luxury no lord could afford, not even the slightly more powerful ones with small bands of followers. Yet here I was, trapped in the most broken, resourceless ruined territory in the entire region, moments away from being mauled to death by shadowhounds, and I was about to eat a perfectly baked pizza. The contrast was beyond surreal. It was the most blatant, outrageous privilege imaginable in a world designed to kill everyone equally. While I stared in stunned amazement at the forming pizza, the advancing shadowhounds froze all at once. A dozen yards from the castle's broken outer wall, their low growls died in their throats, their predatory red eyes blinking in obvious confusion. Their heads swiveled back and forth, nostrils flaring wildly as they sniffed the air. trying to pinpoint the new scent that had flooded their hunting grounds. But they could not see Lilith. They could not see the pizza. They could not detect the warm, supernatural energy lingering around my position. To the beasts, I was still just a helpless, unarmed human sitting alone in the rubble. An easy kill. Yet some invisible, undetectable force was halting their advance, triggering a primal, unexplainable fear in their instincts. Their bodies tensed, ears flattening against their skulls, and they hesitated, unwilling to step further into my territory. I realized in that moment that Lilith's passive protection was already active, even without me ordering it. My exclusive companion was shielding me, masking my presence, and warding off the predatory beasts that should have torn me apart seconds after they finished their last meal. A minute later, the silver light faded completely. The pizza sitting on the flat stone was fully baked, golden brown crust crisp at the edges, cheese perfectly melted and slightly bubbly, pepperoni crisp just right, steam curled upward in thin white wisps, carrying wave after wave of warm, savory fragrance that made my mouth water uncontrollably. Lilith stepped back slightly, her translucent form hovering politely at my side. Her tone calm and gentle. "Your meal is ready, Master. This gourmet dish can restore physical stamina, eliminate hunger fatigue, and slightly suppress nearby hostile beast aggression for 30 minutes. I reached out slowly, my fingers brushing the warm crust of the pizza. It was solid, tangible, perfectly real. No system glitch, no illusion, no temporary buff. It was actual food, fresh and delicious. The kind of meal I'd eaten casually countless times back on Earth but now felt like the most precious treasure in the entire death game world. I tore off a slice, lifted it to my mouth, and took my first bite. The rich, savory flavor exploded across my tongue instantly. The crust was crispy yet soft, the tomato sauce sweet and tangy, the cheese creamy and rich, the pepperoni salty and savory. It was warm, satisfying, infinitely better than any ration or raw wasteland meat any other lord could dream of obtaining. The second I swallowed the first bite, a warm wave of energy washed through my entire body. The splitting headache from my abrupt transmigration faded completely. The cold numbness in my limbs vanished. The trembling fear that had plagued me since I woke up settled into calm, steady confidence. All the fatigue and stress of my near-death experience melted away like snow and sunlight. A new system prompt popped up exclusively in my mind. Golden and bright. Host consumed exclusive wasteland gourmet pizza. Full hunger value restored. Stamina fully replenished. Minor passive buff activated. Beast fear aura 30 minutes. Low-level hostile creatures will refuse to approach host's territory. I lifted my gaze back to the shadow hounds lingering outside my broken walls. The pack was now retreating slowly, tails tucked low, heads bowed in submission. The primal bloodlust in their red eyes was gone, replaced by wariness and terror. They no longer saw me as prey. Some invisible, powerful aura emanating from my territory was telling them that this human was untouchable, that stepping closer meant death. Seconds later, the entire pack turned and fled back into the dark forest, vanishing into the shadows without a single backward glance. The immediate mortal threat that had loomed over my head mere minutes ago was completely gone. I sat there on the cold stone rubble, biting into another slice of warm pizza, staring out at the empty, quiet wasteland, and a slow, triumphant smile tugged at my lips. The entire world was trapped in a merciless death game. Billions of people were starving, bleeding, dying brutal deaths every single minute. Every other lord was scrambling for scraps, fighting beasts and bandits just to survive another day. But not me. I had a hidden system. I had a loyal, invisible ghost MAID. I had hot, fresh pizza in the middle of a lifeless wasteland, while everyone else drowned in despair and bloodshed. I was the only one who got to live, to eat well, to stand apart from the endless slaughter. Lilith's soft voice echoed in my mind once more. "Master, I will continue providing daily gourmet meals and maintain territorial stealth protection. As your territory upgrades, more exclusive recipes and defensive abilities will be unlocked." I leaned back against the broken castle wall, savoring every bite of my pizza, the warm energy coursing through my veins. The hopeless death sentence the system had handed me was broken the second my hidden system awakened. In this world of endless death and suffering, I held the only true privilege, and this was only the beginning. I finished the last slice of pizza and brushed crumbs off my palms, the warm afterglow of the gourmet buff still thrumming gently beneath my skin. My body felt light, sharp, and completely energized. No hunger gnawing at my gut, no lingering tremors of fear, no bone-deep exhaustion that clung to every other survivor in this wasteland. The 30-minute beast fear aura lingered over my broken castle like an invisible blanket, keeping the surrounding wilderness quiet and harmless for the time being. With the immediate threat of the shadow hounds eliminated, I finally had the breathing room to step off my castle grounds and survey the hellish world beyond my walls. I rose to my feet, stretching my limbs slowly, and walked across the cracked courtyard toward the collapsed eastern section of the outer wall. Jagged stone jutted out from the rubble, but none of it posed a threat anymore. The cold wasteland wind still swept across the open plains, but it no longer bit into my flesh. as if Lilith's passive protection continued to filter the worst of the harsh environment without me even noticing. I paused at the wall's breach, leaning against a large, weathered boulder, and directed my gaze toward the neighboring ruined territory, the same patch of barren land where Jasper Reed had barely escaped the Shadowhound pack earlier, before I'd watched him get torn apart right in front of my eyes. Or so I'd thought. As my gaze swept over the dusty, scorched earth of the adjacent territory, I caught a shaky movement behind a pile of fallen timber. A figure was curled low in the dirt, shoulders heaving violently, one leg twisted awkwardly beneath his body. It was Jasper, against all odds. He hadn't died. I froze for a split second, stunned. I'd seen the hounds latch onto him, seen the blood spill across the ground, heard his screams cut short. I'd assumed he'd been finished off instantly, reduced to nothing but carrion for the wasteland predators. But it seemed the pack had been drawn away before they could land the killing blow, distracted by the strange, unexplainable hesitation triggered by my territory's hidden aura. He'd survived by nothing more than a threat of pure luck. Jasper was in horrific shape. His flannel shirt was shredded open along his back and thigh, deep ragged gashes oozing dark, thick wasteland blood that crusted over as soon as it hit the air. His face was pale as ash, streaked with dirt, sweat, and fainter tracks. His lips cracked and parched from severe dehydration. He was clutching a crudely sharpened wooden stick in one trembling hand, the only weapon he'd managed to scavenge since being dropped into this death game, and his entire body shook with every ragged breath he took. He wasn't resting. He was suffering, clinging to life through sheer stubborn desperation. Curiosity got the better of me, and I stepped carefully over the rubble, crossing the invisible territorial line separating my castle grounds from his barren plot of land. The moment I stepped into his territory, I felt a stark difference in the air. The warmth and subtle safety of my hidden aura vanished entirely, replaced by the cold, hollow, oppressive dread that hung over every inch of the public death game wasteland. The system's gray mechanical alerts flickered faintly in the back of my mind, reminding me just how vulnerable every normal lord truly was. Jasper's head snapped up the second my boots crunched on the dry dirt, his bloodshot eyes locking onto my figure instantly. Panic flared across his face first, his body tensing to scramble backward. Before recognition slowly settled in, he knew who I was, another border ruin lord, just as powerless and stranded as him in this endless wasteland. When he realized I wasn't a beast or a bandit, his tense muscles relaxed slightly. Though the suspicion and agony never left his expression, he stared me up and down, taking in my clean, uninjured state, the steady calm in my posture, the complete absence of fear or exhaustion that plagued his every move. Confusion flooded his bloodshot eyes. "You're Elias, right?" His voice came out hoarse and cracked, barely louder than a whisper, like he hadn't spoken or drunk water in hours. "The lord from the broken stone castle over there." I nodded slowly, stopping a few paces away to avoid startling him. "That's me." Jasper let out a bitter, shaky laugh that turned into a pained cough, his injured leg twitching violently as he shifted his weight. "How the hell are you still standing? I saw those hounds lock onto your territory. I thought for sure you'd be dead meat 5 minutes ago." "All of us saw it. Every lord within 3 miles watched those beasts around your walls." I kept my expression neutral, hiding every trace of my hidden system and Lilith's existence. I'd already figured out the number one rule of this death game. Privilege and power were secrets to be guarded fiercely. Show weakness, and you get eaten. Show uniqueness, and you become a target. I had no intention of revealing my exclusive cheats to a stranger, no matter how desperate he was. "They left," I said simply, offering no further explanation. Jasper stared at me like I'd just spoken insanity. "They left. Wild shadowhounds don't just leave easy prey. They hunt until there's nothing left. You had no walls, no weapons, no troops, no food. You had nothing. There's no way you scared them off." He pushed himself up into a sitting position, wincing hard as movement pulled at his open wounds, and gestured weakly at my unblemished body. "Look at you. Not a scratch. No dirt. No blood. No fatigue." Meanwhile, I barely escaped with my life. I'd been crawling around this hellhole for hours, starving, thirsty, running for my life every 10 minutes. "All of us border lords are dying slow. You should be dying too." His words held the raw, bitter resentment of someone trapped in unending suffering, watching another person escape the same torment for no explainable reason. To him, my survival wasn't luck, it was an injustice in this supposed equal death world. I glanced down at his injuries, at the empty, barren stretch of land he called his territory. There was nothing here. No shelter, no supplies, no water, no tools, just dead grass, dusty soil, and the rotting remains of a few small animals he'd clearly tried and failed to hunt, true to the system's warning. Every ordinary lord was trapped in the exact same hopeless loop. Starve, scavenge, flee, bleed, and eventually die. Jasper leaned his head back against the timber, his gaze hardening with bleak certainty as he looked me over again. "You're just delaying the inevitable. The hounds left for now, but they'll come back. Or the bandits will. Word spreading fast among all the trapped lords. Roving bandit squads are sweeping through the border ruins, looting whatever little scraps people manage to find, killing anyone who resists. We've got no soldiers, no defenses, no resources. Our territories are dead. We're all doomed. You're just going to sit in your broken castle and wait to die slower than the rest of us. I almost smiled at his wrong, desperate certainty. He thought I was waiting to die. He thought I shared his suffering, his hunger, his fear. He had no idea that while he'd been bleeding and starving and fleeing for his life, I'd been sitting in my rubble eating a hot, fresh pizza, fully restored and protected by a power no one else in this world could fathom. Maybe, I replied quietly, keeping my tone flat and unreadable. Jasper took my vague answer as confirmation of my helplessness, and his expression softened into exhausted pity. I get it. You're in shock. We all are. 1 minute we're normal people living regular lives. The next we're thrown into a slaughterhouse with no rules, no mercy, no way out. I've already watched 3 other lords die today, torn apart, stabbed, starved to death. It's only a matter of time before we join them. He paused, swallowing hard against his dry throat, his Adam's apple bobbing painfully. I haven't eaten anything since I got here. Tried chewing on some wild berries earlier. They tasted bitter and made my stomach cramp. Can't find a drop of water anywhere. My legs messed up bad. I can barely move. I don't know how much longer I last. His suffering was raw, visceral, and universal for every ordinary player in the death game. This was the reality for billions of people. Endless hardship, constant danger, zero comfort, zero hope, no hot meals, no safety, no hidden privileges, just unrelenting, cruel survival pressure every single second. Meanwhile, my stomach was still comfortably full. My body was in perfect condition. My territory was under invisible protection. I had a ghost maid ready to make me more gourmet meals whenever I wanted. The contrast was staggering, almost surreal. I glanced back toward my castle, where I could faintly see Lilith's translucent silver figure hovering near the courtyard rubble, quietly tidying up the stone surface where she'd baked my pizza. She stayed in the background, unseen by the world, tending to my territory and my needs without a single word of complaint. Jasper followed my gaze, saw nothing but broken stone and empty wasteland, and let out another hollow sigh. Nothing out there but more death. We're all just waiting for our turn. He had no eyes for my hidden blessings, no way to comprehend the gap between my reality and his. To him, every lord was equal in despair. To me, I was already miles above the endless suffering. I didn't bother correcting him. There was no gain in revealing my secrets. No reason to share my exclusive privileges with a stranger who could do nothing but envy and fear what he couldn't understand. Mercy was a luxury this death game didn't reward, and I had no obligation to lift anyone else up when everyone else was left to drown. Instead, I simply turned on my heel and began walking back toward my castle territory. Jasper stared after me, confused. Where are you going? You're just going back to wait. I glanced over my shoulder, my voice steady and calm. I'm going back to rest. Rest. A word so foreign to every survivor in this wasteland that Jasper froze completely, like he couldn't process the concept. No one rested in the death game. No one dared. Resting meant dying. It meant letting your guard down, letting the beasts and bandits close in while you were vulnerable. But I wasn't like everyone else. As I crossed back over the territorial line, the warm, safe aura washed over me once again, chasing away the wasteland's cold dread. Behind me, Jasper continued to huddle in the dirt, injured, starving, terrified, trapped in the endless cycle of survival hell that defined this world. Ahead of me, my broken castle waited not as a death trap, but as my safe haven, my private domain where a ghost maid stood ready to serve my every need. I stepped into the courtyard and watched as Lilith's silver eyes turned gently toward me. No one else could see her. No one else could feel the safety she provided. No one else would ever taste the hot, delicious food she created out of thin air. While the entire world suffered and starved and feared the coming night, I would rest easy, full and protected, and the gap between me and every other doomed lord would only keep growing wider. Section 4. Dusk fell over the alternate American wasteland faster than I expected. One moment, the sky hung a flat, washed-out gray, bleaching the dead plains and broken castle stones into a uniform palette of despair. The next, the horizon bled deep indigo, swallowing the last traces of faint daylight in a single, abrupt sweep. The temperature plummeted in lockstep, the mild daytime chill curdling into a bitter, cutting cold that seeped straight through fabric and sank into bone. The wasteland's wind shifted too, losing its dull, constant howl and morphing into low, erratic gusts that carried distant, unsettling sounds from the depths of the forbidden forest. Night in the death game was not ordinary night. I'd already learned that much from the scattered, fragmented public system updates that drifted through every lord's consciousness. Daytime was dangerous enough, filled with scavenging beasts and roving enemy scouts. But nighttime, it was when the wasteland truly woke up to hunt. I stood in the center of my crumbling courtyard, my gaze sweeping across the breached outer walls and out toward the tree line half a mile away. The forest had looked menacing in daylight, gnarled and shadow-choked. After dark, it transformed into a wall of absolute black. A void that seemed to drink down every stray flicker of dim twilight. No birds called. No small creatures scurried. All mundane wildlife had vanished entirely, hiding from the apex predators that claimed the night as their hunting ground. A faint, cold system notification pinged uniformly across all local LORD channels, the generic gray text flickering dimly in the back of my mind. Wasteland nightfall confirmed. Nocturnal predator surge activated. Shadowhound pack aggression multiplier increased. X2, 3. Border ruin territories marked as priority hunting zones. 0 defense LORD mortality rate rising rapidly. Nearby LORD survival status. 12 LORDs remaining in local sector. 18 confirmed killed since daybreak. 12 left. Out of 30 ordinary people abducted into this local zone just hours prior. The numbers were staggering. A brutal reminder of how thin the line between life and death was for every player trapped in the death game. My gaze drifted eastward, toward Jasper's territory. In the gathering darkness, I could see his faint silhouette huddled behind that pile of rotting timber. Still curled in on himself. He'd not moved an inch since I left him. No fire, no shelter, no food, no water. Just a wounded man clinging to survival in the dark, completely exposed to the night's horrors. Even from this distance, I could see him trembling nonstop. His head constantly swiveling to scan the shadows, every nerve frayed to breaking point. He knew what was coming. Every surviving LORD knew. The night was here, and the hounds were returning. I'd relied on Lilith's temporary beast fear aura to scare off the pack earlier. But I'd memorized the buff's timer perfectly. 30 minutes. That passive protection had expired 10 minutes ago. There was no longer any supernatural deterrent hovering over my broken castle. The territory was once again classified as a 0 defense. Easy target ruin in the eyes of the wasteland's predators. The quiet didn't last long. First came the distant snarls, low and rumbling, echoing out of the black forest in overlapping waves. Dozens of them, layered over one another. Proof that the pack hadn't just returned, they'd brought reinforcements. The initial group that had fled earlier was back, joined by more adult shadow hounds, larger and far more aggressive than the ones I'd seen before. Then came the patting of countless paws against dry dirt, a soft, relentless percussion that grew louder by the second, closing in on my territory from all directions. The hounds were surrounding the castle ruins methodically, cutting off every possible escape route, leaving no gaps for me to run or hide. I tensed slightly, my senses sharp and alert. But not panicked. After eating Lilith's gourmet pizza, my stamina was maxed out, my body in peak physical condition, my mind clear and focused. I wasn't trembling with fear like Jasper. I wasn't delirious with hunger or crippled by thirst like every other local LORD. I was simply waiting, observing the incoming siege with calm calculation. Within 2 minutes, the first pair of glowing red eyes emerged from the treeline, floating like demonic embers in the pitch dark. Then another pair, and another, and another. Dozens of crimson orbs lined the edge of my broken outer wall, locking onto my position in the courtyard. The shadow hounds had fully encircled my territory. They didn't charge immediately. They waited, growling low in their throats, pacing back and forth along the rubble-strewn perimeter, testing the territory for traps, for soldiers, for any sign of resistance. Their primitive predator instincts told them this was a defenseless ruin, ripe for the picking, but their earlier unexplainable retreat lingered in their memory, making them cautious. That faint hesitation was the only buffer I had. From my vantage point, I could clearly see Jasper's reaction to the encroaching horde. He'd spotted the glowing eyes too. I watched his silhouette scramble frantically backward across his barren territory, his injured leg screaming in pain with every clumsy movement. He tripped over loose stones, fell hard into the dirt, and scrambled up again instantly, pure terror driving his broken body to keep moving. He knew the pack wasn't just targeting my castle, they were sweeping the entire border zone, and he was the closest, weakest secondary target. A terrified, hoarse shout carried across the dark wasteland, sharp and desperate. "Elias, they're coming for you. Do something. Run." Jasper's voice cracked with raw panic, his words echoing uselessly across the empty plains. He thought I was trapped. Just like him, he thought I was moments away from being torn apart, with nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, no way to fight back. In his eyes, this was the end for meth, inevitable death he'd predicted earlier. Finally arriving under the cover of night, I watched as he collapsed back into the dirt, gasping for air, his body racked with sobs he couldn't hold back. He was already mourning me, certain that I would die within minutes, and in his position, with his ordinary death game rules, he would have been right. Any normal zero-defense LORD surrounded by a reinforced Shadowhound pack would have been dead before the night's halfway mark. But I wasn't a normal LORD. A soft, silver glow bloomed at my side, faint and unobtrusive, invisible to every other living thing in this wasteland. Lilith materialized from the thin night air, her translucent form hovering steadily beside me, her gentle gray eyes sweeping calmly over the encircling horde of beasts. She showed no fear, no urgency, no concern. To her, this deadly siege was nothing more than a trivial territorial disturbance. Her quiet voice echoed only in my mind, warm and steady amid the rising snarls of the hounds. Master, nocturnal predator siege detected. Total hostile units 37 mature shadow hounds. Host territory currently lacks physical defenses and combat troops. Public system defense rating 0. She listed the facts plainly, laying out the brutal reality of my situation for anyone relying solely on the public death game mechanics. 37 full-grown shadow hounds, all boosted by the night aggression multiplier, surrounding a completely undefended ruin. Statistically speaking, my odds of survival were 0. Before I could respond, a brand new golden system prompt flashed brightly in my consciousness, exclusive to my Hidden Lord system. Overriding the dull gray public alerts flooding the wasteland. Exclusive territory crisis triggered. Detected large-scale hostile siege targeting host private territory. Hidden system emergency mechanics unlocking. New privilege preview available. Territorial phantom barrier. Advanced gourmet attribute buffs. Companion combat manifestation. My breath hitched slightly. New mechanics. New privileges unlocked directly from the pressure of this life-or-death siege. The system wasn't just sustaining might, was evolving with my crises, granting me more power the harder the death game pushed to kill me. Outside the walls, the shadow hounds finally abandoned their cautious testing. A single, deafening alpha snarl split the night air. 37 pairs of muscular paws launched forward in unison. The entire pack charged my broken castle, sprinting across the rubble with blinding speed, fangs bared, claws glinting faintly in the dim starlight. They swarmed toward the breached walls, ready to flood into my courtyard and tear the defenseless lord apart. On the neighboring territory, Jasper fell completely silent. I could picture his wide, horrified eyes locked on my castle, watching the incoming horde descend on my position, already anticipating the brutal death that was seconds from unfolding. The night's crisis had fully exploded. I was surrounded, outnumbered, outmatched, and completely defenseless by all public death game standards. But as the first wave of shadow hounds hurtled toward my walls, I stood perfectly still in the center of the courtyard. No fear in my chest, only quiet anticipation. Let them come. I wasn't playing by their rules anymore. Section 5. The leading shadow hound closed the distance in the blink of an eye. It was the alpha of the pack, massive compared to the rest, its shoulder muscles rippling beneath matted black fur. Jaws stretched wide to reveal serrated yellow fangs glinting with viscous saliva. Night had amplified its bloodlust to a feral fever pitch. Its crimson eyes locked solely on my motionless figure in the courtyard. It sailed over the crumbled stone wall breach in a single powerful leap, body coiled to strike, ready to bowl me over and tear into my throat before I could lift a hand to defend myself. From every logical perspective, this was my death moment. I had no sword, no spear, no armor, no troops. My walls were broken rubble. The public death game system statistics screamed 0 survival chance. Even my peak stamina buff from the pizza was only enough to let me run, never to fight, never to stop a 37B siege single-handedly. Jasper, watching from the neighboring territory, must have already thought me dead. I could imagine him squeezing his eyes shut, bracing for the wet, brutal tearing sounds that had haunted his nightmares since daybreak, convinced he was about to witness another lord's meaningless, violent end. But the second the alpha hound's paws were about to touch my castle courtyard, invisible power erupted. No flashy light, no thunderous explosion, no dramatic system announcement for the whole wasteland to hear. There was only a silent, intangible pressure that blanketed every inch of my territory in an instant, a cold, authoritative force that belonged exclusively to Lilith and my Hidden Lord system. The alpha's midair leap froze completely. Its body hung suspended in thin air, legs outstretched, fangs bared, every muscle locked rigid. The feral snarl died in its throat, replaced by a strangled, confused whimper. Its glowing red eyes widened in primitive terror, darting back and forth as if it could finally sense the invisible guardian standing at my side. A presence far more ancient and terrifying than any wasteland predator. Before it could twitch a single muscle, the phantom force shoved backward with brutal, unrelenting strength. The 8-foot alpha hound went flying. It crashed backward through the wall breach like a rag doll, slamming into the rocky dirt outside with a heavy, pain thud that echoed across the silent night plains. Its massive body skidded 10 feet across the gravel, tearing up dry earth and snapping loose stone fragments, before it finally came to a trembling halt. It scrambled instantly to its feet, head low, tail tucked between its legs, a whimpering sound pouring from its jaws. No longer the apex predator of the wasteland, but a terrified animal facing an unbeatable foe. I blinked slowly, processing the seamless, effortless display of power. Lilith hadn't lifted a finger. She hadn't made a sound. There were no visible barriers, no offensive attacks, no trace of supernatural activity for anyone else to detect. She'd simply exerted her passive territorial authority. And the strongest beast in the pack had been instantly humbled and repelled. The rest of the charging pack froze mid-sprint all at once. Dozens of shadow hounds skidded to abrupt, clumsy halts across the outer rubble, their predatory momentum vanishing in an instant. Every single one of them lowered their heads, their aggressive growls cutting off dead, their glowing red eyes dulling with pure, instinctual fear. They could not see Lilith. They could not understand what was happening. All they knew was that crossing into my castle territory meant encountering an invisible, unstoppable force that crushed their strength and nullified their bloodlust. One brave juvenile hound tried to press forward, testing the boundary. It took one single step past the broken wall line, and the phantom pressure flared sharper. A silent shockwave threw it backward, sending it tumbling over its own paws. Yelping in agony, it scrambled away immediately, fleeing back into the safety of the pack's ranks, too terrified to try again. No hound dared cross the invisible territorial line after that. They circled the perimeter endlessly, pacing back and forth, whining and growling in frustrated confusion. Their night aggression multiplier was still active, their hunger still ravenous, their instinct to hunt still burning strong, but a higher, unbreakable rule forbade them from stepping foot on my land. They were trapped in a loop of fear and fury, completely powerless to harm me. I turned my head slightly, glancing at Lilith's translucent silver figure hovering calmly beside me. Her expression remained serene, unchanging, as if she just brushed away a swarm of flies rather than repelled a lethal beast siege that would have annihilated any other lord in seconds. "Is this your doing?" I asked quietly, my voice steady in the night air. Her soft mental reply echoed instantly in my mind, clear and precise. "Correct, Master. My passive territorial phantom barrier has fully activated. It is invisible to all external entities, including wild beasts, rival lords, and bandit scouts. It suppresses all hostile aggression within territory bounds and inflicts terror debuffs on low and mid-tier hostile units that attempt invasion. The barrier operates silently and leaves no detectable energy traces. No outsider will be able to analyze or replicate its effect. T.S. Your territory will continue to register as a defenseless zero-resource ruin on the public death game system interface, masking your true defensive capabilities completely." A rush of understanding washed over me, followed by a surge of pure, unbridled excitement. This was the true terror of my hidden privilege, not flashy attacks or overpowered displays, but perfect, undetectable invincibility. To every other person trapped in this death game, I was still the weakest kind of lord. Broken walls, no soldiers, no supplies, easy prey. To every beast and enemy that came for my life, my territory was a silent death trap they could not comprehend or resist. I was a sheep in the eyes of the world, but a lion in secret. While I processed my new defensive ability, my gaze drifted back to Jasper's territory. The man was utterly dumbfounded. He was still huddled behind his rotting timber pile, injured and starving, his body frozen in a state of absolute disbelief. He'd watched the entire siege unfold, 37 amplified shadow hounds charging in for the kill, the alpha leaping straight for me, only to be violently thrown back for no visible reason. He'd seen the entire pack halt and cower, terrified of an empty castle courtyard, afraid of nothing at all. From his perspective, what he'd witnessed was impossible. There were no traps, no fires, no weapons, no hidden soldiers. I hadn't moved an inch. I hadn't done a single thing to defend myself. Yet the lethal beast pack had suddenly lost all will to fight. Cowering at my borders like whipped strays, Jasper slowly lifted himself up, ignoring the sharp pain in his mangled leg, and stared across the dark wasteland at my castle with unblinking, bewildered eyes. His mouth hung open, no words coming out. His earlier certainty of my death completely shattered. He didn't understand. No one could understand. The public death game had no rules for invisible ghost maids and phantom barriers. It had no mechanics for exclusive hidden systems that defied every established survival law. All play. RS were supposed to bleed, starve, struggle, and die equally. There were no loopholes, no exceptions, no secret god-tier privileges except for me. I watched as Jasper hesitantly crawled a few paces forward, pushing past his fear and pain, trying to get a better look, trying to find some logical explanation for what he'd just seen. He scanned my walls, my courtyard, every shadow and rubble pile, searching for hidden weapons, camouflage traps, or secret defenses. He found nothing. The castle was still broken, still empty, still a textbook zero-defense ruin by all game standards. Yet the shadow hounds continued to cower at my borders, refusing to advance, whimpering in frustration and fear. A faint gray public system alert popped up briefly in my mind, updating the local lord status board with confused, generic data. Anomaly detected. Shadowhound pack siege terminated irregularly. No defensive actions recorded by host Elias Voss. System analysis failed. Unknown suppression force present. Default verdict. Random predator caution fluctuation. The public system couldn't even identify my hidden protection. It could only brush off the impossible siege failure as a random accident. A meaningless fluctuation in beast behavior. That meant no other lord, no bandit faction, no wasteland force would ever be able to trace my invincibility back to a special system. My secret was safe, sealed away forever from the public game mechanics. Lilith's voice echoed in my mind once more, soft and informative. Master, the phantom barrier will remain active permanently with zero energy cost. It will automatically suppress all hostile invasions of low to mid-tier threats. Higher-tier enemies will trigger advanced defensive countermeasures. Your territory's stealth rating has been maximized. Additionally, Crisis Defense activation has rewarded passive attribute growth. Your stamina recovery speed and physical resilience have been slightly improved. A faint warm tingle spread through my muscles, subtle but noticeable, further refining my already peak physical state. I was stronger, harder to injure, faster to recover, all from simply surviving a crisis that should have killed me instantly. I crossed my arms, standing relaxed in the center of my courtyard, watching the terrified Shadowhound pack continue to meal uselessly outside my walls. They would not leave entirely. Too stubborn to abandon their hunting grounds, but they would never dare enter my territory again. They were trapped in a perpetual state of fear, unable to attack, unable to conquer. Across the plains, Jasper finally collapsed back into the dirt, his defeated, confused expression visible even through the dark. He'd come into this death game believing the world was equal in its cruelty, that every survivor lived and died by the same brutal rules. Tonight, he'd learned the horrifying, unbelievable truth. Someone was playing the game on a completely different level. While he suffered, bled, and starved in the dark, I stood untouched, unharmed, and perfectly safe in the middle of a lethal siege. While every other lord feared the night and the beasts that came with it, I had a silent, invisible guardian shielding me from all harm. The gap between us was no longer just food and comfort. It was life and death. Section 6. The rest of the night passed in an eerie, unsettling calm. The Shadowhound pack never fully dispersed. They lingered in the shadowed treeline, pacing and whimpering like frustrated ghosts. Their primal bloodlust smothered by Lilith's invisible barrier, but never completely extinguished. They were a constant, skulking presence at my territory's edge. A living reminder of how deadly this wasteland truly was. Yet not a single one dared cross the unseen boundary guarding my broken castle, not even to snatch at the dead branches littering the outer rubble. I spent the hours of midnight standing quietly in the courtyard, observing the trapped horde while my mind sorted through every new advantage I'd gained. My passive physical improvements lingered, making every movement lighter, my senses sharper. The fatigue that should have come with surviving a night siege never touched me, thanks to Lilith's barrier. My territory existed in a bizarre paradox, outwardly helpless, inwardly invincible. By the first pale streaks of dawn bleeding over the wasteland horizon, the Shadowhounds finally retreated into the depths of the forest. Their night aggression faded with the darkness, leaving the border plains quiet and barren once more. The immediate beast threat was gone. But I knew better than to let my guard down. The death game never let anyone rest for long. New dangers always rose to replace the old ones. It didn't take long for my intuition to prove correct. The moment daylight fully spilled across the ruined plains, I spotted subtle movement atop the distant rolling hills to the west, movement that had nothing to do with wild beasts. Tall, human-shaped shadows crept along the ridgeline, crouching low to avoid detection, pausing every few seconds to survey the ruined territories scattered across the valley floor. Unlike the desperate, panicked common lords like Jasper, these figures moved with deliberate, practiced caution. They weren't scavenging, they were scouting. Bandits. The realization settled cold and sharp in my chest, cutting through the quiet relief of surviving the night. The public death games system pinged a low-volume regional alert in the back of my mind, confirming my suspicions before I even needed to guess. Roving bandit faction detected in western border sector. Faction leader? Gareth Kane. Faction status: medium armed raiders. Active territory looting and lord execution operations in progress. Warning: bandit squads target undefended ruined territories with 0 military presence and 0 resource signatures. My territory fit that description perfectly on the public system's radar. Broken walls, no troops, no recorded supplies, no defensive activity. To Gareth Kane's bandit crew, I was the easiest possible target: alone, isolated ruin lord with nothing to offer resistance, waiting to be robbed and eliminated without a fight. I tracked the distant bandit scouts with narrowed eyes, watching as they split into pairs and swept across the valley, methodically checking each abandoned and occupied ruin in the area. They skipped over the charred, empty husks of long-fallen lord territories, zeroing in only on the few surviving outposts still standing, including mine and Jasper's battered little plot. One pair of scouts broke off from the main group and began creeping directly toward my castle. They moved like seasoned predators, keeping to the low depressions in the terrain, using dead brush and rubble as cover, their bodies coiled and silent. These weren't ordinary abducted civilians thrown into the game. Bandit factions were native wasteland forces, hardened by years of violence, trained in stealth, raiding, and combat. They hunted player lords for resources, for territory expansion, and for the simple sake of eliminating competition in the brutal wasteland hierarchy. I remained perfectly still, standing casually in the center of my courtyard, letting them observe exactly what they wanted to see. Alone, unarmed lord with no defenses, no plan, no means of fighting back. Lilith's translucent figure drifted to my side, her silver gaze fixed on the approaching bandit scouts. Her mental voice quiet and analytical. 2 bandit scouts detected. Loader combat units. Equipped with crude iron blades and reconnaissance tools. They are tasked with territory assessment and threat verification for the main raiding party. They register your territory as a priority low-risk target. No defensive energy signatures. No troop heat signatures. No stored resource readings detected. I nodded faintly to myself. Perfect. I had no reason to reveal my invincibility early. Let them report me as weak. Let their leader grow overconfident. Let them march in expecting an easy kill and an easy territory takeover. The more they underestimated me, the more thoroughly I could dismantle their attack when the time came. After several minutes of slow, cautious advancement, the 2 bandit scouts halted behind a large boulder just outside my outer wall rubble, roughly 50 yards from my position. They peeked out from cover, studying me and my broken castle intently, whispering quick, hushed updates to each other in rough, guttural tones native to this wasteland world. I could hear their conversation clearly with my newly enhanced senses. Look at this place. Total wreck. Walls split wide open. No fences. No watch posts. Nothing. The shorter scout tilted his head, scanning every inch of the ruins. Lords just standing there like a lost sheep. No weapon. No armor. No supplies stacked anywhere. Dude's got absolutely nothing. The taller, broader scout grunted in agreement, his gaze sweeping over the empty courtyard and collapsed keep. Typical fresh spawn ruin lord. Scared out of his mind. Too stupid to run. Too weak to fight. No food stores. No water reserves. No troops. This territory's ripe for the taking. Boss love this. The shorter one chuckled darkly. All the other nearby lords have been scrambling to build makeshift barricades or hunt for weapons. This one's just sitting here waiting to be plundered. We can take this castle with Hal. FR squad. Easy. No casualties. No pushback. My expression stayed neutral, giving away zero emotion, letting their arrogance fester unchecked. They had no idea the invisible barrier beneath their feet would crush them the second they stepped past the rubble line. They had no clue the defenseless lord they were mocking held exclusive supernatural protection no bandit force in this sector could break. They saw only what the public death game allowed them to see, a helpless, doomed player lord. Before long, the taller scout pulled a crude stone communicator from his belt, a rough device unique to wasteland bandit factions, used to relay field intel back to their command leader. He pressed his thumb to the center, and a static-filled transmission crackled to life. Kane, this is Delta 2. Target ruined castle confirmed, zero threat. Single civilian lord. No defenses. No resources. No combat capability. Territory fully compromised. Recommend immediate low-scale raid for territory occupation. Minimal risk. Zero expected resistance. A deep, gravelly voice crackled back through the static seconds later. Sharp with authoritative command, the voice of Gareth Kane himself. Acknowledged. Hold position and continue overwatch. I'll assemble the raiding squad personally. We'll move on the castle at midday. Secure the territory. Eliminate the lord. And mark the land for faction expansion. No mistakes. Roger that. The scout clipped the communicator back to his waist, a cruel smirk tugging at his lips as he stared at my unaware-seeming figure. Easy territory. Easy kill. Best kind of job. The 2 scouts settled into hidden overwatch positions, hunkering down behind the boulder to keep me under constant surveillance, waiting for their main force to arrive. They didn't hide their intent for a second. They were here to watch me, wait for backup, and watch me die when their leader arrived. I shifted my gaze slightly eastward, toward Jasper's territory, and caught another telling detail. Jasper was curled tight in his hollowed timber pile, his head buried in his arms, trembling violently. He'd clearly heard the bandit communicator static, seen the enemy scouts, and understood exactly what was coming. Unlike me, he had no hidden protection, no invisible barrier, no exclusive system. If the bandits chose to sweep his territory next, he had absolutely no way to survive. Despair rolled off his small figure in waves. The bandit scouts briefly glanced toward Jasper's barren plot but dismissed it instantly. No resources, no structural value, nothing worth looting. My broken castle, even ruined, held strategic value as a border outpost. Jasper's land was just empty dirt. I was their primary target. I turned my attention back to the hidden scouts, my mind quietly mapping out the incoming threat. Gareth Kane was assembling a raiding squad to take my territory at midday. He expected an effortless victory, a free territory to add to his faction's growing control over the border sector. He thought I was just another weak, disposable lord to be crushed under his boot. But every piece of information the scouts had reported was exactly what I'd let them see. I was weak on the surface, defenseless by public game rules, empty of resources and troops. But beneath that facade, I held unbreakable defenses, supernatural protection, and a growing set of exclusive buffs no bandit could counter. Lilith's voice echoed softly in my mind, laying out the incoming threat clearly. Master, estimated midday raiding party size. 12 armed bandit soldiers, led personally by Gareth Kane. Target objective: territory seizure and host elimination. Enemy combat tier exceeds local wild beast threats but remains below barrier maximum suppression threshold. The phantom barrier will neutralize all incoming hostile aggression. No physical harm will reach you. A faint golden system prompt popped up in my consciousness, marking the new turning point in my survival journey. New crisis detected. Faction raid incoming. Hidden system territorial upgrade conditions progressing. Successfully defending against bandit invasion will unlock advanced gourmet buffs and initial territory renovation permissions. My lips curled into a faint, calm smile. The beast siege had gifted me defense and physical upgrades. Now the bandit raid would gift me territory growth and stronger exclusive abilities. Gareth Kane thought he was coming to steal my land and kill me. In reality, he was walking straight into my trap, marching his entire raiding squad into a battle that would only make me stronger. I stood relaxed in the courtyard, meeting the hidden scouts' watchful gazes with empty, helpless composure, and began quietly planning my first human enemy counterattack in this death game. Let them come. I was ready. Section 7. With 2 bandit scouts watching my every move from their hidden overwatch spot, I knew I couldn't afford any overt displays of power. One wrong move, one visible anomaly, and their entire report would shift from zero threat easy target to mysterious high priority anomaly. I needed to remain the helpless, clueless fresh lord they expected until Gareth Kane's entire raiding force stepped foot inside my trap. I leaned back against a weathered stone pillar in the courtyard, slumping my shoulders slightly to sell the act of quiet, anxious helplessness to the scout's eyes. I was a man waiting nervously for inevitable death, trapped in my broken territory with nowhere to run. In truth, I was simply biding my time, waiting for Lilith to craft the advanced gourmet buffs the system had teased earlier. The second the thought crossed my mind, Lilith's translucent silver figure drifted forward, hovering just above the cracked courtyard stone. Her body glowed with a faint, warm radiance completely invisible to the watching scouts, and I felt a gentle shift in the air around my territory, no longer just passive safety, but concentrated, nurturing power tailor-made to strengthen my body for the coming fight. Master. Her soft mental voice echoed in my consciousness, calm and precise. The system has unlocked advanced wasteland gourmet recipes in preparation for the incoming bandit siege, unlike the basic pizza that only restored stamina and minor beast suppression. The new exclusive meals grant permanent temporary attribute buffs, accelerated physical recovery, and passive wound immunity against low-tier weaponry. I will now prepare the Fortress Beefsteak Platter, a siege-grade gourmet dish designed for territorial defense host enhancement. I watched, mesmerized, as silver ethereal light swirled and condensed above the empty stone space beside me, where my first pizza had been a simple, comforting Earth-style meal. This new culinary creation carried a tangible weight of power. The light solidified into thick, marbled wasteland beefsteak, seared to a perfect caramelized crust, steam curling upward in thick, fragrant waves. Roasted golden root vegetables materialized beside it, alongside a rich, savory herb sauce that glistened under the faint daylight, and a side of warm crusty bread fresh out of supernatural thin air. The scent that flooded the courtyard was infinitely richer and more potent than the pizza's aroma. It wasn't just comforting, it was invigorating, sharp and earthy, carrying a subtle thrumming energy that seeped into my skin the second it filled my lungs. Even the wasteland's bitter, dusty wind couldn't dilute the warm, powerful fragrance. While I stared at the perfectly prepared meal, the public death game system continued spamming generic gray alerts for all local survivors. A stark reminder of how universally brutal the game's rules were for everyone but me. Local Lord Vitality Alert. 87 of surviving Border Lords suffer chronic hunger debuff. Chronic hunger penalties in effect. 18 stamina, 12 physical defense, 9 movement speed. No advanced restorative food items available in border wasteland zones. All edible resources are low nutrient. Risk contaminated wild forage. I glanced east toward Jasper's territory out of habit. The man was still huddled in his timber hollow, his body racked with constant shivering. His chronic hunger debuff was obvious in every small movement: slow, sluggish, weak, his injuries refusing to heal without nutrition. He hadn't eaten a single decent bite since arriving in this world, forced to endure the game's crippling penalties just to stay alive. Every other lord in the sector was trapped in the same cycle: starve, weaken, grow more vulnerable to beasts and bandits with every passing hour. Meanwhile, I was about to eat a power-infused siege-grade meal that completely ignored every single one of those punishing rules. Lilith stepped back, her silver eyes crinkling faintly in a subtle, unspoken smile as she presented the full platter. Your siege enhancement meal is ready, Master. Consumption will grant 3 core exclusive buffs: peak physical amplification, rapid regeneration, and blunt weapon resistance. All buffs will last for 12 continuous hours, fully covering the incoming midday bandit raid. I didn't hesitate. I pushed off the stone pillar, leaned forward, and picked up the supernatural steak with my hands, tearing off a thick, juicy bite. The flavor exploded across my tongue with rich, savory intensity, far surpassing any meal I'd ever tasted back on Earth. The beef was tender, perfectly seasoned, bursting with concentrated nutrients that felt like liquid energy flooding down my throat. The roasted vegetables were fresh and crisp, the herb sauce bright and warming, every component crafted to absolute perfection with no waste, no imperfection, no contamination, something utterly unheard of in a wasteland where all wild food carried disease, fatigue, or poison risks. The second I swallowed the first mouthful, the buffs slammed into my body like a gentle, unstoppable tide. My muscles, already refined from earlier passive system upgrades, tightened and strengthened, every fiber growing denser, more resilient. The faint lingering tiredness of the previous night's siege vanished entirely, replaced by boundless, endless stamina that made me feel capable of running, fighting, and sustaining peak activity for hours without fatigue. My senses sharpened further still. Me hearing picked up the distant rustle of wasteland grass 100 yards away. My vision clarified to spot the smallest movements of the hidden bandit scouts behind their boulder. My reflexes speeding up exponentially. A flood of exclusive golden system prompts materialized in my mind, detailing every stat upgrade in precise, unignorable detail. Host consumed advanced siege gourmet, fortress beef steak platter. Chronic hunger immunity activated. No stamina decay for 12 hours. Peak physical amplification, 25 overall strength, 30 movement speed, 28 reaction speed, rapid regeneration buff. Minor wounds heal instantly. Moderate wounds heal 80 faster than standard game mechanics. Blunt iron weapon resistance. Reduces all low-tier bandit blade and club damage by 45. Exclusive gourmet bonus. Host's physical state exceeds 99 of ordinary player lords in this sector. I closed my eyes for a brief second, soaking in the overwhelming difference in my physical state. Before the hidden system, I'd been an ordinary modern human, weak and soft, completely unsuited for brutal medieval-style combat and wasteland survival. Now, I was faster, stronger, tougher, and more resilient than any regular player trapped in the death game, even without Lilith's invisible phantom barrier. I now stood a genuine fighting chance against armed bandits. When I opened my eyes again, my gaze drifted back to the two hidden scouts still watching me intently. They had no idea the helpless lord they'd mocked and written off as easy prey had just transformed into a physically enhanced super survivor right in front of their eyes. To their eyes, I was still slumping listlessly against stone, appearing timid and exhausted. They could not see the stat buffs, could not feel the surging energy in my body, could not detect the supernatural power coursing through my veins. Their underestimation deepened with every passing second. I continued eating slowly, savoring every bite of the siege platter, drawing out the meal to maintain my helpless act. With each mouthful, my attributes climbed higher, my body refining itself further, eliminating every last trace of human fragility. By the time I finished the final bite of bread and sauce, I was operating on a completely different physical level than any bandit or local lord in the entire border zone. Lilith's voice echoed once more, updating me on my upgraded status and upcoming rewards. Master, your physical attribute threshold has broken past ordinary player limits. Upon successful defense of the upcoming bandit raid, the system will fully unlock territory renovation functions, allowing you to repair collapsed walls, build basic defensive structures, and establish permanent resource generation nodes. Additionally, advanced combat gourmet recipes will be unlocked, including strength-boosting meat platters, healing stews, and night vision tonic meals. A slow, confident grin tugged at the corner of my mouth. This was the true power of my hidden system. While every other lord in the death game fought, starved, and struggled just to maintain basic survival, I grew stronger with every crisis. Where others were weakened by hunger, fear, and battle fatigue, I was enhanced, refined, and upgraded by every incoming threat. The bandits thought they were coming to claim an undefended ruin and kill a weak, inexperienced lord. They thought this raid would be an easy victory to expand their faction's territory and loot trivial scraps. They had no idea they were marching straight into a trap set for their own destruction. They were not raiding a helpless lord, they were walking into a field test FO. My newly enhanced body and my unbreakable territorial barrier. I brushed the last crumbs from my hands, straightened my posture subtly, and tilted my gaze toward the western hills where Gareth Kane was assembling his raiding squad. The midday sun was climbing higher in the sky, casting sharp, clear light across the barren wasteland, marking the approaching hour of the enemy attack. Out east, Jasper still trembled in his hollow, clueless about how drastically the playing field had shifted. He would continue to suffer and starve, trapped under the cruel, equal rules of the public death game. But I was no longer bound by those rules. I had a ghost maid who fed me power instead of rations. I had supernatural buffs that turned mortal danger into opportunity. I had an invisible barrier that nullified all incoming threats. And now, I had a body strong enough to fight back against the wasteland's most dangerous human raiders. Midday was coming fast. Gareth Kane and his 12 bandit soldiers were on their way, and I was more than ready. Section 8. The midday sun climbed steadily toward its zenith, burning pale gold over the wasteland and bleaching the broken stones of my castle into dull, lifeless gray. Heat rolled across the barren plains in slow, shimmering waves, drying out the last traces of night dew and turning the air thick and stagnant, for all intents and purposes. The border sector looked completely deserted, empty save for the 2 hidden bandit scouts still camped behind their boulder, watching my every move with unwavering scrutiny. I knew the clock was ticking. Gareth Kane was finalizing his raiding squad miles away, arming his men and preparing to march on my territory. Every passing minute brought the enemy closer, and I had no intention of sitting idle and waiting for their arrival without laying subtle groundwork. Still, I could not afford a single suspicious movement. The scouts' eyes were glued to me, and one misstep would shatter my helpless facade, alerting the bandit faction that I was far more dangerous than I appeared. So I leaned back against the stone pillar once again, letting my shoulders slump, my posture lax and defeated. I let my head hang slightly, my gaze drifting lazily across the crumbling courtyard, selling the image of a terrified, inexperienced lord paralyzed by incoming doom. I even let my hands tremble faintly at my sides, a small, deliberate act of vulnerability designed to cement the scouts' misplaced confidence. The trick worked perfectly. From my peripheral vision, I caught the 2 scouts exchange a lazy, smug glance. Their body language used arrogance and boredom, fully convinced they were monitoring a powerless victim with zero capacity for resistance. They slouched lower behind their cover, no longer bothering with intense vigilance, certain that the incoming raid would be nothing more than a routine cleanup job. While they lazed in their hiding spot, I communicated silently with Lilith through our mental bond. My thoughts sharp and methodical. Clear the territory perimeter. Eliminate all remaining hidden beast threats. Leave no ambush points for the incoming bandits. Work silently. No external traces. Lilith's translucent figure stirred beside me, her silver eyes calm and focused. She did not need to speak aloud to acknowledge my order. A faint, undetectable ripple of ethereal energy spread outward from my castle grounds, flowing across the rubble-strewn borders and into the surrounding thickets of dead brush and jagged stone. The phantom barrier did not just defend against active invasions, it cleaned my territory from the shadows, erasing every hidden hazard that could be exploited by my enemies. I'd known there were straggler beasts lingering in the outer ruins after last night's siege. A handful of injured juvenile shadow hounds had avoided the full retreat, hiding in collapsed stone crevices and thick dead shrubbery, nursing their fear and waiting for an opportunity to strike when the territory defenses seemed down. To any ordinary lord, these hidden stragglers would have been invisible ticking time bombs, capable of launching sudden ambushes during the bandit raid and creating chaotic openings for enemy forces. Not for me. One by one, faint, quiet whimpers sounded from the outer perimeter, instantly stifled by Lilith's suppressing energy. There were no loud snarls, no crashing stone, no visible movement for the watching scouts to detect. The straggler hounds were simply neutralized, purged from my territory without the slightest disturbance to the wasteland's surface calm. I continued my helpless act, staring blankly into the distance, while my hidden guardian systematically swept every inch of my land. She cleared burrowed wasteland rodents that could scatter and alert enemies, removed unstable loose rubble that bandits could use for cover, and erased every minor territorial flaw that could be turned against me in the upcoming fight. Within 5 minutes, my entire territory was fully sanitized, cleared of all wild threats and hidden ambush points. It was still broken, still ruined, still visually defenseless, but beneath that ragged exterior, it was a perfectly controlled battlefield, tailored entirely for my advantage. Lilith's quiet mental confirmation echoed in my mind. Perimeter sanitized. 0 residual wild hostiles remaining. All external ambush points neutralized. Territory battlefield stability maximized for incoming faction combat. A faint golden system pro MPT popped up exclusively for me, rewarding my subtle pre-battle preparation. Territory hidden cleanup completed. Minor preparation reward granted. Enemy ambush resistance 15. Raid defense progress 35. I breathed out slowly, my expression never shifting from that hollow, anxious helplessness. The scouts still saw nothing but a terrified kid waiting to die. They had no idea I just eliminated every hidden variable that could have ruined my defense. To further sell my disguise, I pushed myself away from the pillar and took a few shaky, unsteady steps across the courtyard. I stumbled slightly over a loose stone, catching myself on a crumbling wall fragment, exaggerating clumsiness and nervous uncertainty. I let my breath come in shallow, panicked bursts, making it appear as though my nerves were frayed to the breaking point. The shorter scout snickered quietly from his hidden position, his voice carrying faintly on the warm wind. Look at him. Can barely stand straight. Dude shaking so bad he'll probably drop dead of fear before Kane even gets here. The taller scout grunted in agreement, crossing his arms lazily. Typical fresh spawn. No grit, no survival instinct. Thinks sitting still and trembling will save him. We'll wrap this up in 10 minutes tops. Boss will be pleased with how easy this capture goes. Their condescension was thick and unbridled, and I let it wash over me without reaction. Let them underestimate me. Let them report my weakness to Gareth Kane. The higher their expectations of an easy victory, the more devastating their eventual defeat would be. I turned my unsteady steps toward the eastern edge of my courtyard, angling my body so the scouts could clearly see my desperate observation of Jasper's neighboring territory. Jasper was still huddled in his timber hollow, his body frail and trembling, his injured leg useless beneath him. He hadn't moved an inch all morning, too weak, too starved, too terrified to do anything but cling to survival. I feigned a glance of hopeless envy toward him, as if I wished I had even his meager, unsafe shelter. The scouts ate the performance up entirely, interpreting every subtle gesture as proof of my inexperience and cowardice. In reality, I was studying Jasper's condition, filing away critical information. He was completely out of the fight. He would not interfere, would not help, would not survive if the bandits decided to sweep his territory after raiding mine. He was a non-factor, a passive spectator doomed to watch my battle from the sidelines, powerless to participate or resist, satisfied with my perimeter cleanup and enemy misdirection. I returned to the center of the courtyard and sank down onto a flat stone, slouching forward with my elbows on my knees and my head in my hands. I mimicked the posture of a defeated man surrendering to his fate, hiding my sharp, calculating gaze beneath my shadowed brows. While I maintained this vulnerable disguise, I took stock of my current strength, running through every buff and advantage in my head to solidify my battle plan. My peak physical amplification was still active, my strength, speed, and reflexes far surpassing ordinary human limits. My rapid regeneration would patch any minor wounds instantly and heal moderate injuries nearly 5 times faster than normal game standards. My iron weapon resistance cut bandit blade damage by nearly half. On top of all that, Lilith's invisible phantom barrier stood eternal and unbreakable, ready to suppress every hostile advance the moment the bandits stepped onto my land. I had no weapons, no armor, no soldiers, but I had supernatural physiology, an impenetrable territorial defense, and complete battlefield control. Gareth Kane's 12 raiders were coming with crude iron blades, club weapons, and overconfident arrogance. They were coming to conquer a weak lord and seize a broken territory. They were walking into a perfect trap. As I waited, another faint system update pinged in my mind, marking the enemy's approaching advance. Hostile raiding party movement detected. Gareth Kane's squad distance closing. 2 miles. Estimated enemy arrival time, 8 minutes. The final countdown had begun. I lifted my head slightly, my eyes still wide and fearful for the scouts' benefit, but my heart steady and calm in my chest. Every part of my territory was cleaned, every buff active, every variable controlled. I had spent the entire morning hiding my strength, misleading my enemies, and silently preparing for war. The weak, helpless lord the bandits saw was nothing but a mask. Beneath the disguise, I was fully primed, fully upgraded, and completely ready to shatter their invasion before it even had a chance to begin. Section 9. 8 minutes stretched into an agonizing, suffocating wait, at least for anyone watching from the outside. For me, every second was a quiet, calculated tick of the clock. A final chance to anchor my composure and lock in every detail of the coming battle. The midday sun blazed overhead, scorching the wasteland until the air hummed with dry heat, and the entire border valley fell into an eerie, unnatural hush. No wind stirred the dead grass. No distant beast snarls echoed from the forest. Even the skittish wasteland wildlife had vanished, instinctively fleeing the incoming wave of human violence. The 2 bandit scouts behind the boulder finally abandoned their lazy boredom. They straightened up, hands drifting to the crude iron daggers at their waists, their gazes fixed firmly on the western ridgeline. The easy arrogance in their posture faded into sharp, militant alertness. Their squad was arriving, and the raid was no longer a distant planet with seconds from commencement. I kept my posture slack and terrified, head resting in my hands, shoulders trembling with feigned anxiety. To them, I was a broken man frozen in fear, incapable of rational thought or resistance. Beneath my mask, every sense was locked on the approaching enemy, my upgraded reflexes and sharpened perception tracking every faint vibration across the barren plains. It started with distant dust. A thin, brown cloud billowed over the crest of the western hills, rolling upward and outward as a group of figures marched steadily toward my castle ruins. The dust cloud grew larger and denser by the second, marking the heavy, unhurried advance of Gareth Kane's raiding party. They were not running, not rushing, they were strolling into battle with the unshakable confidence of men who had never lost a border sector raid, who viewed player lords as nothing more than easy prey to hunt and conquer. One by one, the bandits crested the hill and descended into the valley floor, spreading out in a loose combat formation designed to surround and overwhelm undefended territory. There were 12 of them in total, matching Lilith's earlier scan, every single one a hardened wasteland raider clad in tattered leather armor, their hands gripped with rusted iron short swords, spiked wooden clubs, and crude hunting spears. Their faces were hard, scarred, and cold, stripped of any mercy, shaped by countless days of looting and killing in the death game's brutal frontier. And at the head of the squad marched Gareth Kane. He stood head and shoulders above his men, a towering broad-shouldered man with a shaved scalp, a jagged scar splitting his left eyebrow, and cold, icy blue eyes that swept the battlefield with ruthless, calculating authority. He wore thicker, sturdier leather armor reinforced with iron plating, a jagged iron broadsword strapped to his back, and a heavy combat boot tread that crushed the dry earth beneath his feet. There was no doubt he was the undisputed leader of this bandit crew. Every movement he made radiated dominance, cruelty, and unyielding confidence. This was the man the public system marked as a mediocre faction leader. A veteran raider who had seized dozens of ruined territories and killed countless player lords since the start of the death game. Gareth's gaze locked onto my broken castle the second he crested the hill, zeroing in on my hunched, trembling figure in the courtyard. A cold, mocking smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth as he took in the sight of my defenseless territory. Just as the scouts reported, he rumbled, his voice deep and gravelly, carrying easily across the quiet plains. A broken shell of a castle. No walls, no guards, no supplies. And one scared little boy playing lord. His men let out low, rough chuckles, their tension melting into unbridled arrogance. They spread wider, fanning out to flank my territory's collapsed walls, completely unconcerned with any form of resistance. To their eyes, this raid was nothing more than a routine cleanup, a trivial territory grab to add to their growing faction domain. The two hidden scouts finally stepped out from behind their boulder, falling into formation beside the main squad, saluting Gareth with rough, practiced gestures. Boss, territory's been quiet all morning. He hasn't tried to run, hasn't tried to hide, hasn't done a single thing to defend himself. He's just been sitting there shaking like a leaf. The taller scout reported quickly. Zero threat, zero tricks. This land is ours for the taking. Gareth nodded slowly, his cold eyes never leaving my hunched form. Typical fresh earth spawn. They're all the same, soft, weak, unprepared for the wasteland's rules. They think being named a lord grants them safety. They don't understand that titles mean nothing without strength to back them up. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, leading his squad toward my outer rubble line. His broadsword still sheathed at his back. Not even worth drawing for a fight he deemed meaningless. Form up perimeter. He barked out orders sharply. 4 men circle the east breach. 4 men hold the west rubble. The rest follow me in. Secure the courtyard first. Flush him out. Execute him clean. Then sweep the ruins for any hidden scraps of resources. We'll claim this outpost as our new forward watch station. His men responded instantly, splitting into disciplined teams and moving toward the broken wall breaches with practiced efficiency. They'd done this hundreds of times before invading defenseless player territories, killing the resident lord, and seizing land for their faction. Every movement was polished, every tactic refined from endless raids. I could feel the weight of their collective hostility pressing down on me, thick and suffocating. 12 armed, experienced raiders, all focused entirely on my elimination. For any ordinary zero-defense lord, this would be an inescapable death sentence. Even a lord with basic makeshift weapons and barricades would be overwhelmed in seconds. Off to the east, Jasper had gone completely silent. I risked a quick peripheral glance and saw him frozen in his timber hollow, his hands clamped tight over his mouth, his eyes wide with terror as he stared at the advancing bandit squad. He knew exactly what was coming. He'd watched lords get raided and butchered before. He understood that I had no soldiers, no walls, no weapons, no way to fight back. In his eyes, my death was inevitable, guaranteed, only seconds away. He was already watching me die in his head, yet beneath my feigned panic, I felt only calm, sharp anticipation. Lilith's translucent figure hovered steady at my side, her mental voice quiet and unwavering amid the incoming chaos. Hostile forces entering territorial outer perimeter. Phantom barrier standby fully active. All enemy weaponry classified as low mid-tier. Fully suppressible. Your combat buffs remain at maximum potency. A fresh wave of exclusive golden system prompts flashed in my mind, updating my battle progress as the enemy closed in. High-risk invasion confirmed. 12 hostile combat units. Faction leader Gareth Kane. Raid defense progress updated. 65. Successful defense will unlock core territory renovation, permanent stamina boost, and advanced gourmet combat recipes. Gareth and his men were now only 50 yards from my wall breaches, their footsteps heavy and thunderous against the quiet wasteland ground. The bandits' rough laughter and quiet taunts grew louder, their confidence swelling with every step they took unopposed. Look at him shaking, one young bandit jeered, adjusting his spiked club. He's too scared to even stand up. I'll bet he begs for mercy before we even touch him. Save your breath. Another scoffed. Mercy's not part of the deal for fresh spawn lords. We kill him quick, claim the land, and move on. No wasted time. No loose ends. Gareth held up a hand to silence his men, his cold gaze pinning me in place. No unnecessary noise. Secure the territory first. I want this outpost fully under our control before sundown. This is prime borderland, perfect for watching forest beast movements and intercepting other fleeing player lords. He paused at the edge of my outer rubble line, standing directly on the invisible boundary of Lilith's phantom barrier, and tilted his head, studying my trembling form with cruel amusement. Last chance, Lord, he called out, his voice sharp and commanding. Surrender any hidden resources. Kneel. And submit. I'll make your death fast. Resist. And we'll drag it out. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't lift my head. I simply continued my act of helpless despair, letting him believe I was too terrified to respond. Gareth's smirk hardened into cold indifference. Fine. Have it your way. He lifted a hand, ready to signal his men to charge the courtyard and end my life in one brutal sweep. The entire valley tensed. The bandits readied their weapons. Jasper held his breath, waiting for the slaughter to begin. The moment of no return had arrived. The enemy was fully committed, fully overconfident, fully trapped in my hidden ambush. All that was left was to strike. Section 10. Gareth Kane's hand sliced downward in a sharp, brutal gesture. Charge. The single word shattered the valley's suffocating silence like a blade cutting through silk. 12 hardened bandits erupted into motion at once, their boots pounding hard against the dry wasteland soil, kicking up clouds of choking brown dust that billowed behind their rushing forms. The crude iron weapons in their hands glinted sharply under the blazing midday sun. Jagged short swords, spiked oak clubs, and rusted hunting spears honed thin from countless raids and killings. Their faces were twisted with greedy, bloodthirsty grins, every muscle coiled with the practiced ferocity of men who never failed to conquer a defenseless player lord. They moved in perfect, disciplined formation, splitting precisely as Gareth had ordered hours prior. 4 raiders sprinted toward the east wall breach, 4 toward the west rubble gap, and the remaining 4 elite soldiers flanked Gareth himself, surging straight for the central courtyard where I remained hunched motionless. Their tactics were flawless, honed by hundreds of border raids, designed to lock down every escape route, overwhelm any possible resistance, and crush their target in a single, overwhelming assault. From the outside perspective, this was nothing short of a one-sided massacre in the making. Alone, unarmed, terrified fresh lord trapped in a broken castle, facing 12 battle-hardened raiders and a ruthless faction leader. No walls to hide behind, no weapons to fight with, no tricks to turn the tide. Every rule of the death game screamed that I would die in seconds, torn apart by blades and spikes before I could even lift my head. On the neighboring territory, Jasper's entire body went rigid, peering through the gaps of his rotting timber shelter. His bloodshot eyes were locked wide on the charging bandit horde, his trembling intensified to a violent, uncontrollable degree, his injured leg throbbing with fresh agony from the sheer stress surging through his body. He'd already accepted my death as a certainty. In his mind, he was merely waiting for the inevitable burst of blood and violence that would mark my end. Another meaningless casualty of the wasteland's unforgiving cruelty. He had watched shadowhounds fail to kill me overnight, but he chalked it up to random, unexplainable luck. Luck could not save me from 12 armed, trained raiders. Luck could not stand against coordinated human combatants who knew every trick of wasteland warfare. Today, that fleeting miracle would finally run out. The bandits closed the 50-yard gap in mere heartbeats, their speed ferocious and unrelenting. The leading raiders were seconds from crashing through the wall breaches, from flooding into the courtyard to surround and slaughter me. And that was when the invisible slaughter began. The first 4 bandits reached the east wall breach, their spears raised high, ready to surge into the courtyard. The moment the toe of the leading man's boot crossed the invisible territorial boundary Lilith maintained, a silent, crushing force slammed into his entire body. No sound erupted, no light flashed, no warning appeared. The raider simply froze mid-stride, his body locking rigid in place as if every muscle, every tendon, every nerve had been instantaneously petrified. His raised spear halted in the air, his bloodthirsty grin frozen on his face, his eyes blown wide with utter, incomprehensible terror. He could not move, could not breathe, could not twitch a single finger. The 3 raiders directly behind him crashed into his rigid back one after another, their momentum too great to halt. They piled into their frozen teammate, shouting in confusion, shoving forward in a desperate attempt to keep their charge going, only to trigger the same invisible suppression the second their bodies fully crossed the boundary. One by one, they locked up completely. 4 elite raiders, frozen solid mid-charge, stacked clumsily in the east wall breach, transformed into motionless statues of terror. Their weapons remained raised, their bodies coiled in attacking stances, yet not a single muscle could flex. The unbreakable phantom barrier had clamped down on them fully, stripping away all their freedom of movement, nullifying their combat prowess entirely. The exact same scene unfolded at the west rubble breach mere milliseconds later. The 4 raiders sprinting for the western opening crossed the territorial line in tight formation, eager to flank me and cut off any chance of escape. The second their feet touched my castle's protected soil, invisible pressure crashed over their bodies like a 1,000-ton boulder. Screams died in their throats mid-breath. Charging steps halted instantly. Swinging weapons froze mid-air. 8 professional, battle-tested raiders were completely neutralized in the span of a single breath. Not a single blow struck. Not a single defense made. Not a single chance to resist. The overwhelming invasion force that should have steamrolled my territory in seconds was crippled before it even began fighting. Only Gareth Kane and his 4 closest elite bodyguards remained unaffected, still standing just outside the boundary line, their charge stalled by the sudden, inexplicable halt of their entire squad. Confusion ripped through the bandit leaders' ranks, replacing their earlier arrogance with raw, bewildered panic. What the hell is happening? One elite bodyguard roared, his voice tight with alarm, his hand tightening on his sword hilt as he stared at his frozen teammates. Why aren't they moving? They're stuck, another shouted, eyes darting wildly across the motionless group at both breaches. They crossed in and just froze. No traps, no wires, nothing. Gareth Kane's cold smirk vanished completely, wiped clean from his face in an instant. His icy blue eyes narrowed sharply, scanning every inch of the courtyard, the walls, the rubble, searching frantically for hidden tripwires, camouflaged runes. Buried defensive arrays, any logical explanation for the impossible scene unfolding before him. He found absolutely nothing. The castle was still broken, still ruined, still visually defenseless. There were no visible barriers, no magical formations, no hidden soldiers, no technological traps. The territory looked exactly as it had for weeks, an abandoned, crumbling wasteland outpost occupied only by a weak, terrified fresh lord. Yet 8 of his best men were trapped in place, completely immobilized, unable to move or speak or fight. A flicker of genuine unease flashed across Gareth's scarred face. He was a veteran of hundreds of wasteland raids, had conquered player lords with hidden traps, makeshift armies, and rare defensive items alike, but he had never seen an ability like this. No skill, no item, no faction tech in the entire border sector could lock 8 fully armed combatants in silent, invisible paralysis without a single trace of energy fluctuation. Pull back, he barked sharply, yanking his broadsword free from his back at last. The jagged iron blade glinted menacingly in the sun, his grip white-knuckled with suppressed fury. Hold the line. Do not cross the rubble line. His 4 bodyguards scrambled backward instantly, retreating to his side, their earlier bravado completely shattered. They stared at their frozen teammates with naked fear, no longer seeing an easy raid, but an unknown, terrifying anomaly they could not comprehend or combat. Gareth's gaze snapped back to me, the helpless, trembling lord in the center of the courtyard. The fear and confusion in his eyes curdled into unbridled rage. You, he snarled, voice low and thunderous. You've got a hidden artifact. Some kind of boundary suppression trick. Coward. Hiding behind cheap gimmicks instead of fighting honorably. He assumed this was a one-time consumable item. A rare disposable trap I'd stumbled upon as a new spawn. It was the only logical explanation his wasteland experience could process. He could not fathom that this was permanent territorial authority. An exclusive hidden system power no public game rule could account for. It was precisely that ignorance I'd been waiting for. Slowly, deliberately, I lifted my head. The trembling in my shoulders vanished entirely. The panic slackness in my posture hardened into calm, unshakable resolve. The wide, terrified look in my eyes faded, replaced by sharp, icy certainty. The helpless, defeated mask I'd worn all morning shattered completely, falling away to reveal the strength hidden beneath. I was no longer the scared little boy playing lord. I was the master of this territory. It's not a gimmick, I said plainly, my voice steady and unyielding, carrying clearly across the stunned silence of the valley. It's just that my land doesn't tolerate trespassers. Gareth's rage flared hotter at my words, his grip on his broadsword tightening until his knuckles bulged. Arrogant brat. You think a single disposable trap can stop me? I've crushed lords with far stronger tricks than this. I'll cut through your boundary, break my men free, and drag your corpse through the rubble for making a fool of me. Roaring with fury, he charged forward alone. He moved far faster than any of his men, his broad frame eating up the ground, his broadsword raised overhead, muscles coiled with decades of combat experience. As a mid-tier faction leader, his strength and speed dwarfed ordinary raiders, enough to cleave through steel plates and shatter stone. He was convinced his superior combat power could overpower whatever weak suppression field lingered on my territory. He would learn just how wrong he was. Gareth crossed the territorial boundary in a single powerful leap, his sword swinging downward in a brutal, killing arc aimed straight for my unprotected head. The second his blade entered my territory, the phantom barrier flared with concentrated, targeted suppression far stronger than the group paralysis applied to his underlings. A violent, invisible force slammed into his sword arm mid-swing. Crack. A sharp, bone-rattling crack echoed across the courtyard. Gareth's arrogant roar cut off abruptly, replaced by a guttural, agonized scream. His powerful swing froze completely, his arm locked in place. The bones in his forearm strained to the breaking point by the barrier's overwhelming pressure. The iron broadsword trembled violently in his grip, unable to move an inch further. As if he'd swung his blade into an impenetrable wall of solid air, his entire body seized up instantly, every muscle locked tight by the territorial suppression. He stood frozen mid-leap, suspended in the air for a split second before crashing clumsily back down to the stone rubble. His powerful combat strength completely nullified. He could not move his arms, could not twist his torso, could not even flex his fingers. The most powerful bandit leader in the border sector was trapped, helpless and immobile. In the center of my courtyard, the 4 remaining elite bodyguards outside the walls watched in utter, mind-numbing disbelief. Their unbeatable boss, their ruthless, undefeated leader who'd crushed every territory in the region, had been neutralized in a single step. No fight. No struggle. No chance to resist. He'd crossed my boundary, and he'd been broken instantly. Complete. Dead silence descended over the battlefield. I stood up slowly, straightening to my full height, my movements easy, fluid, and unburdened. The peak physical buffs from my siege-grade steak meal hummed at maximum power in every fiber of my body's superior strength, blistering speed, razor-sharp reflexes, and weapon resistance that rendered all their iron armaments trivial. I began walking calmly toward the frozen Gareth Kane, my footsteps quiet and deliberate against the cracked stone. Each step I took amplified the terror in his wide, stunned eyes. He could see me clearly now, the calm confidence in my posture, the unshakable resolve in my gaze, the total lack of fear or hesitation. He finally understood that I had never been scared. I had never been helpless. I had simply been waiting for him to throw his entire raiding squad into my trap. Impossible, he gritted out through clenched teeth. His voice strained and hoarse from the barrier's crushing pressure. No fresh spawn has power like this. No border territory has defenses this strong. What are you? I stopped directly in front of him, close enough to see the frantic panic swirling in his icy blue eyes. Close enough to inspect the terror etched into every line of his scarred face. I'm the lord of this territory, I said flatly, and you trespassed. With that, I lifted my hand and closed my fingers around the hilt of his prized iron broadsword, with my upgraded strength. I twisted and pulled in one smooth, effortless motion, yanking the blade free from his frozen grip. The weapon that had killed dozens of lords, that had conquered countless territories, now rested lightly in my hands. Gareth's eyes bulged with rage and humiliation. Yet he could not move a single muscle to stop me. I turned the sword over in my palm, testing its weight, then shifted my gaze to the 4 terrified bodyguards frozen outside my walls. They stood rooted in place, their weapons limp at their sides. Every trace of their earlier bloodlust vanished, replaced by pure, primal fear. Tell your faction what happened here today, I said clearly, my voice carrying across the entire valley. Tell every raider in the border sector. This territory is not weak. It is not prey. Anyone who steps foot on my land will suffer the same fate. None of them dared move or speak. They were already broken. Their will to fight shattered beyond repair. At this moment, I glanced eastward once more, toward Jasper's territory. The man was no longer hiding his face. He'd pushed himself halfway out of his timber hollow, his injured leg forgotten, his mouth hanging open in abject, stupefied shock. His eyes were glued to my courtyard, tracking every movement, every frozen bandit, every detail of the impossible scene unfolding before him. He had watched me tremble and feign fear all morning. He had waited for my inevitable death. He had believed I was just another doomed lord, powerless against the wasteland's cruelty. Now he watched single-handedly defeat a 12-man elite raiding squad and their faction leader without taking a single scratch, without firing a single blow, without breaking a sweat. The gap between us was no longer subtle. It was cosmic. While he starved, suffered, and cowered in the dirt, helpless against every minor threat, I commanded supernatural territorial power that defied all death game rules. While he lived in constant fear of beasts and bandits, I turned the most feared raider crew in the border sector into helpless prisoners in my own courtyard. His worldview had been completely shattered. The equal, cruel wasteland he'd struggled to survive in did not apply to me. I existed on a completely different level, untouchable, unbeatable, incomparable to every ordinary survivor trapped in the game's brutal system. A flurry of exclusive golden system prompts burst to life in my mind, bright and triumphant, marking the complete victory of my first major territorial defense battle. Hostile invasion fully neutralized. 12 bandit raiders faction leader Gareth Kane subdued via territorial phantom barrier. Raid defense progress. 100 defense successful. Core reward unlocked. Basic territory renovation permission activated. Permanent passive reward granted. 12 full body attribute growth permanent. Advanced gourmet recipe pool updated. Combat healing stew. Strength boosting venison platter. Night vision tonic meal unlocked. Hidden system territorial upgrade tier 1 unlocked. New function available. Manual territory repair. Basic resource generation. Hostile threat logging. Warm, powerful energy flooded my body the second the prompts finished scrolling, seeping into every muscle, every cell, refining my already peak physical state to an even higher level. My strength, speed, reflexes, and resilience all climbed permanently, solidifying my advantage over every ordinary player and wasteland foe in the region. Lilith's soft, serene mental voice echoed beside me, confirming my hard-won victory. Master. Territorial defense mission completed flawlessly. All invading hostiles are subdued and non-threatening. The territory has qualified for formal reconstruction and resource circulation. Your hidden system has officially broken away from the public death game's survival constraints. I breathe out slowly, a faint, genuine smile tugging at my lips. This was only the beginning. I had started this death game as a zero resource, zero defense ruined lord, marked for immediate death by the system's brutal statistics. I had faced night beast sieges, overconfident bandit invasions, and the same crippling survival pressure that crushed billions of ordinary survivors. But while everyone else suffered, I grew stronger. While everyone else obeyed the game's cruel rules, I broke them. While everyone else fought just to survive another day, I conquered my enemies and upgraded my domain with every crisis. I turned back to the frozen Gareth Kane, his eyes still blazing with helpless rage and disbelief. He'd come to seize my territory, kill me, and add my ruin to his faction's domain. Instead, he'd handed me my first major system upgrade, unlocked my territory's reconstruction potential, and cemented my status as the true ruler of this border sector. The wasteland's predators, its raiders, its cruel survival rules, none of them could break me. From this day forward, this broken castle ruin was no longer a death trap. It was my domain, my safe haven, my growing empire in the heart of the death game's endless suffering. And anyone who dared to invade would learn the same brutal lesson Gareth Kane and his bandits had today. I was not a survivor in this death game. I was its exception. Wait, don't click away. There's an extra chapter. The Silent Guardian's Observation. Extra chapter. The Silent Guardian's Observation. I exist in the gaps of the world, between light and shadow, between life and death, between the cold, rigid rules of the public death game and the exclusive, unshackled truth of the hidden lord system. No mortal eye can see me. No hostile creature can detect me. I am a wisp of silver moonlight bound to this broken castle, bound to one person, me master, Elias Voss. Since the moment he awakened as my hidden lord, I have watched him every second. I have stood by his side through every trembling breath, every quiet calculation, every moment he masked his sharp resolve beneath a fragile human facade. All the battles he fought, all the strength he gained, all the miracles he displayed to shock this cruel wasteland, I witnessed every single detail, unseen and unheard. The mortal survivors trapped in this game believe strength lies in blades, barricades, and ruthless killing. They believe survival depends on trampling others, on hoarding meager resources, on cowering from every beast and raider that walks the barren plains. They abide by the game's brutal, equal rules, suffering hunger, fear, and despair day in and day out. But my master is different. He is calm where others panic. He is patient where others rush to slaughter or flee. He does not fight for mere survival. He turns every crisis that the game intends to kill him with into fuel for his growth. I have seen it clearly from the very start. His soul does not belong to this wasteland of despair. Last night, when the 37 shadow hounds swarmed the territory under the cover of darkness, I did not worry for a single second. My phantom barrier was already active the moment night fell. I watched the alpha hound leap toward his unguarded figure, fangs bared to tear his throat apart, and I knew the outcome long before the beast froze midair. The feral, bloodthirsty predators that terrified every other lord in the sector were nothing more than trivial pests trespassing on my master's domain. I repelled them silently, without sound, without spectacle. I did it not merely because it was my sister-bound duty to protect my lord, but because no harm was permitted to touch him, not while I existed in this territory. The invisible barrier is not just a territorial skill, it is my will, woven into every inch of this broken soil. This land is his, and all who intrude shall be suppressed. I observed the neighboring lord, Jasper, as he trembled in despair through the night and the morning. I saw his confusion, his terror, his inability to comprehend why the lethal horde dared not approach this crumbling castle. He mistook my master's invincibility for luck, for fleeting coincidence, for unexplainable fortune. Mortals always explain the inexplicable with trivial excuses. They cannot fathom that a person can stand above the game's rules. They cannot understand that there exists a guardian who walks only for one person, who bends all wasteland laws to keep him safe. When the bandit scouts crept close at dawn, hiding behind boulders to spy and mock my master's supposed weakness, I recorded every word of their arrogance. I marked their positions, analyzed their combat tiers, scanned their communication devices, and reported every detail to my master without omission. I watched my master slump his shoulders, feign terror, and played the role of a helpless, panicked fresh lord. A faint, quiet warmth stirred in my ethereal chorea, feeling the system did not program into me admiration. He did not rely solely on my protection. He schemed, he waited, he endured the taunts and contempt of trivial enemies to lure them into a perfect trap. While other survivors would collapse under fear and desperation, he maintained perfect composure, hiding his soaring strength beneath a fragile human mask. To assist his layout, I silently cleansed the entire territory. I erased hidden beast stragglers, eliminated ambush cover, stabilized every inch of the battlefield, turning this ruined land into a customized arena for his victory. I crafted siege-grade gourmet meals to refine his physique, breaking the mortal debuffs of hunger and weakness that chained all other players. I watched him eat the steak platter, watched his physical attributes surge beyond mortal limits, watched his senses sharpen, His resilience strengthened. Every improvement he gained pleased me. Every layer of strength he accumulated made my silent guardianship worthwhile. When Gareth Kane led his 12 raiders to charge the courtyard, roaring for slaughter and territory plunder, the mortal world witnessed only a one-sided invasion. I witnessed the end before it began. The moment the first bandits' boot crossed the territorial boundary, I unleashed full suppression. I locked their muscles, stifled their breath, froze their weapons midair. 8 seasoned raiders, arrogant and bloodthirsty, were reduced to terrified, immobile statues in the blink of an eye. I felt their frantic, incomprehensible fear. They could not see me, could not understand what crushed their combat power, could not resist the invisible will that dominated their bodies. Gareth Kane's rage was the most trivial of all. He assumed my protection was a disposable artifact, a cheap trick, a fleeting gimmick. He charged alone, confident in his mid-tier faction leader strength, determined to overwhelm the boundary and kill my master. I targeted concentrated suppression solely on him. I shattered his attacking momentum, strained his sword arm to the brink of fracture, and nullified his decades of combat experience in a single instant. The man who had dominated countless border territories, who had slaughtered countless player lords, was trapped helpless in the center of my master's courtyard. I watched my master stand straight, cast off his mask of weakness, and reveal the calm dominance of a true lord. His voice was steady, unyielding, carrying the dignity that belonged only to him. His movements were fluid, powerful, no longer restrained by mortal physical limits. He stripped Gareth Kane of his sword, crushed the bandits' will to fight with mere words, and established his territory's unshakable authority in front of all surviving witnesses. Jasper's shock was palpable. His worldview completely shattered. He finally realized the gap between him and my master was not a difference of resources or luck. It was a difference of realms. He struggled and suffered under the game's rules, while my master transcended them entirely. When the golden system prompts flooded my master's consciousness, unlocking territory renovation, permanent attribute growth, and advanced gourmet recipes, I felt the bond between us deepen silently. My master's growth is my growth. His territory's promotion is my domain's promotion. His victory is my sole meaning of existence in this wasteland. I am a phantom made of the hidden system. I have no past, no independent will, no desire for freedom or power. All my functions, all my power, all my ethereal life revolves around one core command: protect Elias Voss. Serve Elias Voss. Stand with Elias Voss through every crisis and every future. The wasteland is cruel. The death game is merciless. And countless dangers still lurk in the dark forests and distant faction territories. More powerful enemies will come, larger sieges will arrive, and harsher trials will test my master. But I will always be here, invisible, silent, unshakable. I will purify his land, suppress his enemies, refine his strength, and guard his every breath. I will turn every invasion into his stepping stone, every danger into his harvest, every despairing rule of this death game into proof of his transcendence. The world sees a broken castle, a mortal lord, and endless mortal struggles. I see my master's rising empire, and the eternal guardian who will always stand behind him. This is my vow, silent and everlasting. Where you stand is territory, where you walk is victory, where you exist, no darkness shall ever prevail. And that's a wrap, folks. If this story gave you that sweet dopamine hit and was more satisfying than peeling the plastic off a brand new TV, do me a massive favor. Obliterate that like button and hit subscribe. I'm locked in the content mine, serving up fresh, ridiculously satisfying stories every single day. See you tomorrow for your next fix.